Hi everyone, McBeard here. Welcome back to another card review for Way of the Witcher. New expansion coming to Gwent on December 8th. That's very soon. And of course, that will be preceded by Gwent Masters, which will be on the 5th and 6th. That is tomorrow and Sunday this weekend. Flake, myself, Impetuous Panda, Shinmiri, Jaggeris, and Paul Berja, all part of the best Gwent Masters. Don't miss it. It's going to be starting 10 o'clock a.m. North America Eastern Time. It starts at 4 p.m. for EU Central, and you're going to have to do the math from there. So that's going to be awesome. But we have 8 very interesting cards to talk about. It took me a really long time to talk about the last batch, and this patch has some This batch has some real interesting cards. First card we're going to be talking about is Dire Bear. This is the legendary beast for Skellige, namesake of the Bear School Witchers. This is a 9 provision, 8 strength beast. Yes, this is right. The website is wrong. It is 8 strength, confirmed by Molegion on the Gwent team. Units in this row and the opposite row can't be boosted. So you are getting 8 points. You're going to get an 8 strength bear, which is pretty normal for Skellige. It tends to be the strength of the big gold bears. But it also, in a lot of matchups, completely shuts down a win condition, potentially. Because it's this row and the opposite row, moving the bear around will stop it from being a problem for you if that is part of your counter strategy. It is killable. It doesn't have any armor on it, doesn't have any extra protection on it. It is lockable as well. Much like most cards that you would build around, like something like Artis, you would need to protect this card. You can play this in Syria Nova decks. You can play this with a Renew and with a Defender if you really wanted to build around this card. But even if you built around this card, are you so sure your opponent is completely fucked? Like, do you really screw up your opponent that much? You're only blocking one row at a time. The other row is free to do whatever. This obviously means that one row you can block and the other row you could Erden. That's something that Skellige doesn't mind, because usually they're playing with the higher strength units and they care less about boosts, more about reaching their white strength potential. So I could see that being something that could occur, especially if you're considering running Renew and just saying, you know what, green numbers just aren't going to beat me, so I'm not going to lose to Thrive. I'm not going to lose to this new crazy boost mechanic that's coming in with Northern Realms. As long as I have last say, or as long as I can play this card where I want to, it's just not going to, you're not going to be able to get that boost. However, all in all, I think this card, when we're looking at like the 9 strength super cards, like I would look at this and compare it to Keldar, where I would say that Keldar is stronger, but they would both kind of be suffering from the easily dealt with camp. So when you're spending this many provisions around something that is easily dealt with, you need to have such a strong plan for it. And I feel like Dire Bear also cares so much about your opponent's plan as well, that it's going to be a niche card, but that's pretty on brand for all the legendary beasts. All the legendary beasts have a build around factored into it, I think. In fact, this is probably the most build around set we've seen. So I would say overall, this card is likely going to see supporters, but it's going to be a niche card. And it doesn't seem as breakable as some of the other beasts we saw. Like, I think that obviously if the Salamander pops off, that's a really scary card because it's poison, and poison has scared us before. If the Saber-Tooth Tiger pops off, it means that scoia'tael Control is really good, and that scared us before. And if the Viper pops off, it means that Graveyard Recursion is super strong, and that scared us before too. So does this card really scare me? I feel like because it's limited to the opposite row and not the whole board, I'm not that scared by it. If it was the whole board, I would be very worried about it. However, it's just the opposite row. I think we can play around it for the most part. It's fair, and you don't want to play cards that are just fair. Yeah, that's, you know what, that's a really good way of saying it. And Impetuous Panda would agree with you. I actually remember having a long time ago around the time when Hyperthin, Reveal, Tibor, Yen, Yennefer, and Triss were actually at a Gwent Open at the time. It was around the time when Enslave was also really good. And I was talking to Panda like, I think Enslave is great. Why are we seeing all this Hyperthin? And Panda says, Enslave was fair. It's good, but it was fair. Hyperthin plays unfairly, and that's why it's competitive. So it's cool that you say that, Iwalius. Dire Bear seems dire fair. The Cat Witcher Adept is a 4 provision, 3 strength Witcher on deploy, melee, give an enemy unit bleeding with duration equal to the number of units on that unit's row. Deploy ranged, give an allied unit vitality with duration equal to the number of units on that unit's row. So this is a very versatile, very cool engine that is not really an engine. So again, breaking the rules a little bit. All the adepts have seemed to be engines, but the Griffin isn't really an engine, and this isn't really an engine, but it is providing overtime value. And this one is, again, very much like almost every scoia'tael card, so extremely board state dependent that in a vacuum, I feel like I would start looking at this and just say, the Dryad Enchantress is probably just a little bit better. But I would also say that it being a Witcher is always going to matter in a set that cares about it, because you will have these extra little tricks. Just a few extra little tricks. So we have the Witchers here. The interesting thing about this card, and something that I don't know how much I like or dislike about this, but it is still interesting. I'm not playing this 4 provision point card first. A lot of 4 provision engines, especially for most of the ones that we've seen in this set that look like portal pieces, this is certainly not that. This is a card that has a deploy that matters on the length of the game or how you have set up. You could play it defensively much earlier if you were starting off with something like Zoltan's Company or something that's going to spawn extra units. But even then, you're probably only playing that for 6 in a really rushed scenario in the first couple of cards in the game. So I would say that it could be a little undertuned at first glance. It could be a little undertuned, but it is the ceiling that makes this card probably look like that. Because if your opponent, let's say, I honestly, this I truly don't know. I don't know what the world of the Witchers look like, but if it involves the School of the Wolf, Vesemir, Lambert, and Eskel in any way, and they function in a similar way where there's just going to be perhaps a couple of early rounds where there's just like a flood of units, thinning or otherwise, then yeah, the Cat Witcher Adept could drop down with the 5 bleed early on, and that makes him pretty good. But I feel like more often than not, this is just going to be playing a little bit undervalued. I don't know what you guys think, but that's where I'm at on this one. All right, this is the Succubus. All right, let's read this one carefully. And understand what it can do. It's a 5 provision, 4 strength beast with a death wish that says, at the end of your turn, so it's like a ruin style death wish, at the end of your turn, summon a different copy of Succubus from your graveyard to a random row and give it doomed. Adrenaline 3, don't give it doomed. So what this card is it's almost as if they tried to turn Ruin into a balanced bronze card by saying, so the first time this card dies, nothing happens. But the second Succubus that dies will bring back the first Succubus. And then that first Succubus, when it dies, will bring back the second Succubus. So this becomes a late game Ruin, because at Adrenaline 3, when that Death Wish is triggered, the Succubus that returns no longer has doomed on it, which means that it will continue to go back into the graveyard and be pulled out by another Succubus. The problem is there's only 2 Succubi. You would have to probably copy one of these with Cairnthir, I suppose, to really get the advantage, because you'd have to be doing, you'd only have 3 turns to really go nuts with this card. But in those 3 turns, if you were able to set up the undoomed loop of returning from the graveyard, you would have budget Ruin, and it would be just as strong. Operator, yeah, Operator. I think Adrenaline, I mean, the fact that the Adrenaline is on it, it's tough, right? So the way this would be played, it's also slow, potentially. But you would play the Succubus with the intention of only triggering the next Succubus's Death Wish later in the round. But only later when you're finally committing to the full push. But not even really, because let's say you... I mean, I feel like it's getting to the point where I really have to like play this to figure out how this would work. But let's say I'm monsters. Let's say I won round 1. Let's say I'm bleeding my opponent round 2. We're deep in the round. We're in the adrenaline threshold for the Succubus. We're bleeding my opponent. And now I'm playing my other Succubus or 2 Succubi. And I'm getting all this extra value. My opponent manages to get out of it. But, you know, my opponent had to commit. And we go into round 3. And I have a bunch of non-doomed Succubi in my graveyard. As long as I can access one Succubus, either from my deck, from my graveyard, or from whatever. As long as I can access another Succubus, then for that short round 3, this is essentially Ruin. It seems like I'm putting a lot of setup into this bronze to get Ruin's effect. But if I was building around this card and I was building around Ruin, I'm maybe playing Overwhelming Hunger, I'm playing tons of Consume cards as well, this is almost a surefire way to never make it, like, you don't want any of the Consumes to be wasted when you play Consume. You don't want your K-Ran to be sitting there like, oh, I just got to use it. So if you have Ruin, you have Detlef, and you have this card, what I'm really seeing here is perhaps a freeing up of provisions. But if you were going to play this card, you'd have to play them both, and you'd probably have to play a card that cared about it. So if you can set it up, that's good. But if you're copying beasts, perhaps you are very interested in copying beasts, because the Chimera cares about copies of beasts as well. This card just seems like we really have to put some thought into. It's not going to work like Blue Stripes or like the Chromandos. Like, they're not all going to come out at the same time. Right? You have to get the value slowly. It's too slow, right? Now, think about a situation, though, where this is only a Death Wish, though. This is only a Death Wish, which means that the card doesn't have to die. The Death Wish just has to be triggered. So there's a couple of ways where you could do that. We have Death Wish triggers in the game, Maelorn, or something like, what is it called? Ritual Sacrifice? You also could purify the Doomed status as well. Because you do also have the Wild Hunt Purifier. So there's probably like a whole bunch of ways you can make this work so she can come back and help you later. And if you can trigger the Death Wish without actually killing this card, it means that you can maybe purify them at the same time, use Chimera, boost all the other Succubi. It's really hard for me to really see the perfect situation for this card because I feel like there's so much build around, so I'd have to take so much out of a Monsters deck. And Monsters do need some pretty core pieces, but this is a Death Wish card. Haunt already cares about this card, so, you know, that's pretty good for Monsters. I think I got, Abea, the Swamp Hag. It just seems like a lot of setup, but, you know, it seems like a pet project for the Succubus. My, what have we here? It appears to be Northern Realms' legendary beast, the Arch Griffin. Another card with a name that's been floating around. But maybe it's found home with the namesake of the Griffin School. 10 provisions for a 5-strength beast. At the end of the round, shuffle this card back to your deck, keeping its boosts. So we have Vi, and now we have this card, Spirit of Siri Dash. But they're both different, right? Vi has to die. Arch Griffin has to live. Okay, so there's a couple of things that this card, if you showed this card first, it would get obliterated, I'm pretty sure. But we know so much. We know so much about the set that Arch Griffin is coming into. Let's look at all the ways that the Arch Griffin can be boosted in the first place. First of all, Pincer Maneuver will boost this card by 5, meaning that if you wanted to use Pincer Maneuver for the purpose of making sure Arch Griffin is good, is that you're playing it for 10. If you play Pincer Maneuver to play this card for 10, hoping that the win condition around this card will win you the game, then it's worth using your leader, which means that you always have like a 10-point reach to take round 1, and you're already considering taking round 1 quite handily with Erland. So having control of the game with this boosted and in your deck really puts you in a strong position, because if your opponent can react to this card makes me a little worried. You know, this card can get banished. If it's not boosted at all, it just gets killed. A 5 for 10 that does nothing when you play it is quite hard to stand behind. But because of the stuff that's in this set that helps it, changes stuff a little bit. What else do we have here with the Arch Griffin? Well, we're going to get to the Griffin Witcher Ranger. But if you are playing the Griffin Witcher Ranger and you're moving boosts from this card to the Griffin Arch Griffin, that's something that you might want to do. So let's say like you AA this out. It's coming down with the extra 4 points. So you would be able to immediately place the 4 points onto the Griffin. If you're drawing it with the Griffin Witcher Mentor, if it happens to be the top card in your deck, which Northern Realms doesn't have any way of assuring in its faction, and also it's Adrenaline Flora, you could boost it in that case. So obviously there are a lot of ways to boost this card. And then once it is on the board, there are a lot of ways to boost this card. So getting it to stick, getting it back into your deck, that seems to be all you need to do. And the reason why I say that seems to be all you need to do is because once this card's already back in the deck and boosted, now it actually can do a bunch more. Much like Vi, you can draw it with Alzur's, meaning it comes back again. So it improves the quality of your deck. Additionally, all the boosts you put on this card goes back into the deck, even if you never see it again, but you haven't played Erland. It can all be used by Erland later, so you can get all those boosts back. Do I think that there is going to be a super reliable way to make sure that this will stick? The only way I see that really happening is if you are using this card to take the round. And I do think that with Erland and a deck that can really just perhaps overcommit, just play dirty, really, really strong engines early on, load up the Arch Griffin, play Erland, give your opponent the question, do you want to take on Erland or do you want to take on my boosted deck? But you got to pick one of those things. But again, it just seems like a lot of setup. It's a great last say card. The fact that you can play it again and then it continues to come back. If you find a way to do like a hyper thin Northern Realms situation, but it all depends. It has to be alive on the board and not locked. Ever since Defenders were added to the game, I have not put it past any deck to protect a major piece. Usually, the Defender being moved, purified, usually opens up the opportunity to banish the next major piece. That seems to be Gwent's environment right now, especially in a more control meta where we're seeing stuff like Becker's. So like we need to remove these massive important engines, the Pavkos, the frigates. We need to remove these engines. So playing big control when in a meta that demands it, it seems like it's been okay. Nature's Gift has been able to just kind of rock that. But I mean, like, I don't think that this is, I feel like this is more memey than Vi is. This is harder to execute than Vi. But I also think that somehow the payoff must be better here because of Erland. I really want to get your feedback on this one. All right, so Pope saying draw the Ranger with AA to get the 4 boost and then dump the boost onto the Griffin for the ultimate carryover. Between this, there's a lot of cards that are suggesting that resets might be fine to have around. One reset and this card is just. But the thing is, you always get this card back into your deck. But do you want it back in your deck if it's not boosted? Isn't it a bad card? Like, you are threatened to shuffle back in a slightly better Infiltrator into your deck. That also could clog up Mata. Like, it seems like there's a lot of risk here. It's going to take some expertise, but not. I mean, I think it's the case for Viper, for Dire Bear, for Arch Griffin, for Salamander. These might be the hardest cards to make work. The legendary beasts they seem like the smartest cards. Ivar Evil Eye could switch the power. It could be a pain in the ass. Yeah, Havel, that's very true. Round 1 Pinsir, Oniro, and Nero. Yeah. The obvious combo is to get the boost from Erland. It's not the obvious combo. It's one option. I think the idea is that these points are all in your deck, but you have access to them. Sort of. It's a good last say in that it's going to be like, it could be a lot of points. Like, let's say my opponent passes like super early on me, and I can just play cards without, I could play all the way down to 4 cards. I could play Arch Griffin and put like a massive boost on it and a massive boost on it. Pass, dry pass, and then we go in and I've got this fucking mega Griffin. If your opponent can't react to it, it actually creates this monster card later in your deck. I don't know. What gives Veil an NR? What does? Nothing. Nothing does. You got to use Marlene. In short, I love this card. I love return to your deck mechanics. I always have. All right, let's talk about the Viper Witcher Alchemist. 5 provisions for a 5 strength Witcher. On deploy, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 on top, then swap the top card of your opponent's deck with yours. This card's disgusting. Let's say you had like a bad, like you knew there was a bad card in your deck and you gave it to them. Cool. That's gonna happen. But you could potentially put a very specific unit on top of the opponent's deck and then take it. You could put a unit on top of the opponent's deck and just take it. The Viper Witcher, the poison that is represented in Witchers now, it's not just poison, I'm going to kill you. It's I'm poisoning your deck. I'm filling your deck with crap. I'm taking things away from you in the night. This card's effect is gotta be infuriating, right? What's going on, Shaggy? Man, you got to reveal Warret. Yeah, we'll talk about Warret. I'm ready to talk about Warret. Did you guys have a fun time talking about Warret? My chat can't wait to talk about Warret. So like I'm saying, the effect seems infuriating. It seems infuriating. The ultimate meme is giving your opponent Ophiri Merchant. I think that's where I want my highlights to go. So there's not much else to say. The one thing I would like to say as well is that they put the strength in the right place here. Right now, 5 for 5 with an effect seems to be fine. That seems to be baseline where we're at. So tempo-wise, tempo's going up. So I think we need that. Like a good turn is 9 these days, I think. So if you can get away with this, Nilfgaard has no problem setting up to fuck your deck up though, right? Take your time, Nilfgaard. I'm going to poison your stuff. I'm going to take your stuff. Oh, you want to pass against me? You know, I'm going to keep doing it. So I see Nilfgaard really, they're leaning into that the faction that annoys you. For sure. All right. This image is captured from the Gwent Discord. I didn't do the capturing. This is the Griffin Witcher Ranger. We'll go back into HD in just a second. This is the latest Northern Realms Bronze. 5 provisions for a 2 strength Witcher. On deploy, boost self by 1 for every unit on the opposite row. On order, transfer all boosts from self to an allied unit. Now, this effect I like. I really like the effect of moving a boost from one unit to another. I think that this is an excellent Northern Realms ability, and we've been dying to have a card that does this. We used to have a card that moved charges from one unit to another, and that was Taller. Now Taller just gives 3 charges. But having a card that moves a boost from one unit to another, I think that this card in general has opportunities associated with it with regards to the library of cards. This card itself, we talked about this earlier, when you use Amphibious Assault, you immediately get 4 points to move on order if you can zeal it, or later on, like you can move it onto the Arch Griffin, something like that. Plus, when you play it, you're getting a number of other boosts as well. Your opponent likely... I mean, it's weird. I think that this is going to be... You're going to see a lot of resets out there, but I don't think there's going to be so many resets that you'd ever waste one on this. You wouldn't use removal on this. It would actually be hard to remove without like a full reset. And why are you doing that? Because if you move these boosts, like the Griffin Witcher Ranger represents a huge threat, because if you have Enseis or Seltkirk with Zeal and a huge unit to duel in, the Witcher just being there means that you can't go in with that. And that's one of the reasons why Redea and Seize was so good, is because the engineering solution, once it was on the board, that shit was there. And Seize is coming out and taking out your best dude. So I think that the synergy of the Northern Realms cards is questionable, but I would say that for the most part, these are very Northern Realms abilities. I think that this card is a very Northern Realmsy ability, and I'm happy that it's in the game. Transfer boosts. I think that Griffin Witcher represents, like an excellent engine. We have, a very excellent engines in the high provision spot as well as, really these are the most Northern Realmsy cards. But the Witchers themselves are they're kind of all over the place, right? Now, I guess the question just before I close off on this card is, do you think that this is a good card? Because this card is so Northern Realmsy, and because I feel like this card could come out in any expansion for Northern Realms, a card that does this effect, is this a good card? Good for engine overload, feels like a siege card, really low floor, interesting, useful, good one-of, decent. Don't think it's good. I think it's good. And I think that they definitely playtest. 70 cards. They definitely. We've already seen adjustments and stuff. I bet this was tested at 3, and it must have been a little too good. It must have been, I think. But the fact that it's not 1 means that, it's not. You look at the cards that are 1. We've seen a few of them, right? Colgrim, Viper Witcher Mentor. These cards that are 1 with very strong effects. Cat Witcher Mentor. Salamander. We know that these cards they can't nerf them anymore. Like, they made these effects. It's like we got to put this effect on something that's worth nothing otherwise. So the fact that there's a 2 on it is, piques my interest a little bit. 2 very, 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 very interesting cards to talk about here right now. What's up, Fast Stun? We talked about this yesterday, but we have some new cards to look at here because there's some new artworks that we saw. But I do really like Cat Witcher. I think Cat Witcher has really good art. I think Spontaneous Evolution or Spontaneous Mutation has really good art. I think Geralt Quen is just good. It's just like a good scene. It's just a good Witcher scene. Sorry, my friends, I have a runny nose, and I've edited far too many videos where I've had to watch myself touch my nose and just be so angry at my stupid face. So, Maxi Van Decker. My boy Impetuous Panda dropped this one. What a card. What an interesting card. 6 provisions for a 6 strength neutral human. On deploy, look at your deck in order from top to bottom. You may shuffle your deck, then put a card on the bottom of it. So this means that you may shuffle your deck or you may not. Then put a card on the bottom of it. That part you have to do. So this is an interesting card because it's pretty obvious that this effect is good. But it comes attached to a card that itself is slow, right? You do not have to shuffle your deck. Yeah, of course. No, knowing the order and also basically scrying. You could scry that top card, so it's like the next card is a good card. Or just put a card that you'd rather just not pull. Basically with Maxi, you could play Maxi and a card that you'll never ever play, like a card that's purposely just like a squirrel or something that you might never use. So yeah, it's slow and without synergies. That is true. This card, I've been thinking about this card all day long. But the thing is, the fact that you can shuffle your deck matters a little bit if you're playing against Nilfgaard and they're trying to get huge value or trying to get like massive cards from you. Because you do sort of, you pull the little switcheroo on them. But you can only do that once. Yeah, you can just look and you do have to put a card on the bottom of your deck, but you don't have to shuffle your deck. So I would say that, much like Fisher King, this card, it's not like Fisher King. This is just a super hard card to evaluate. It's a really hard card to evaluate because no matter how you look at it, you're playing 6 points. How much do you value this knowledge or this ability to shuffle your deck? For the price of a bad card, you shuffle. Like, the idea is, like, it's the same idea, like, with Bomb Heaver. Like, you could counter a card, and if you don't, you're playing a low amount of points. So 6 is a lot better than 4. The ability is... It's so great that we are... You guys remember old Dandelion? Way back in the day when Dandelion would have All God's ability of boosting cards in your deck. But he was coded in a way that showed you your cards in order, and that was not intended, and they hotfixed that shit when I did an expose on cheating with Dandelion. You guys remember that? Now, that effect is legitimately on a card. It's like reverse old Zarthisius, where your opponent could see your deck in order, and you just had to sit there sweating. I think this card is... It's fantastic, but I don't think it's going to see much play. No, it was original Dandelion. Beta, long, different game ages ago. War at the All-Seeing is the latest Witcher for Nilfgaard. 8 provision for a 7 strength Witcher. On deploy, melee row, put the highest cost card in your opponent's deck on top of it. Deploy unranged, put the lowest cost card in your opponent's deck on top of it. Immediately, you are thinking about cards that have already been revealed, like Viper Witcher Mentor. Set provision of this card to match provision cost on the top card in your opponent's deck. And then, we see cards like the Viper Witcher Alchemist. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put one on the top, and then swap the card with your opponent's. So, the combo seems quite simply... If your opponent has no way of drawing their card, which, as far as I know, they do. Mata is that. And Mata might be back. I think Mata comes back in this expansion to combat Nilfgaard. But the combo seems to be War it, put the best thing in your opponent's deck on top, Viper Witcher Mentor, play Viper Witcher Mentor for like 11, 10 or 11 or 12, who knows? And then you take that card. The Greedy Nilfgaard archetype is made for red coin, otherwise you don't have enough tempo in blue. Well, you have Ivar. And the Viper Witcher Mentor is playing for like double digits, probably. So, I mean, it's true. There's not a lot of points here. There's not. But the Mentor gets you there. And you don't have to play Mentor Viper Witcher. You play Mentor Viper Witcher. Boom, you just got another extra 11 points. I think because Mata is around, I think you just wait till you see War it, and then you play Mata. I think it's going to probably be the meta. I would just play Mata, I think, in almost all my decks if this was around and like trying to fuck with me. I would just take that card, put it in my hand. Can't get it when it's in my hand now, and now they don't know what's on top. Keep in mind, Northern Realms could be playing with Griffin Witcher Mentor. You can draw a card here. Nilfgaard, of course, has tons of ways to draw cards. Skellige has a ton of ways to draw cards and have been doing that a lot. So I think War It as a card is so damn cool. And the synergy with the other Witchers is clear. It's clear. But I think that if you're going to go into the game like, I'm going to fuck with some people's decks, be ready for very safe cards that people are going to add to counter this. Mata's a good card anyway. Mata seems to work with a lot of these cards that have adrenaline end of turn effects to extend the round anyway. But I do think that War It is going to be very good, very strong, and in a lot of situations it's going to deny some stuff, because you also could just put the lowest card on top of your opponent's deck. You can figure it out. But it seems like all these cards that are combating each other on deck manipulation, they're not really doing the points. Vivaldi Bank, yeah. It's just not polarized enough. There's just enough card draw, I think, for this to be that crazy. But it is crazy. Don't get me wrong. The effect is, whew, that's an effect right there. Honestly, this is an effect right here. But this is an effect right here. But you don't need to use War It for the Viper Witcher Mentor to be good. You just need knowledge or a late enough round. My dudes, I wanted to just stop in and do a card review for these massive cards that we got to see today. Not going to do a long stream today. We got a whole weekend of Gwent coming up starting at 10 a.m. NA East 4 p.m. EU Central. Gwent Masters 2, of course, with some of the best players in all of Gwent, champions and crown point winners alike. And of course, Flake, myself, Panda, Jagras, Shinmiri, Palbergia, Gravish, Cams, Tailbot, Payaball, Demarcation, Wongid, Saber, and finally, who could forget Colamon? Yes, who could forget Colamon? 8 of the greats in just basically non-stop clashes where anybody can win. It's going to be fucking crazy, guys. Hope you enjoy that. Hope you enjoyed this video as well. Hope you enjoyed the stream, because I actually am going to go offline at the end of this one. And I'll see you guys tomorrow bright and early. It's going to be Gwent Masters, and it's going to be, you know, it's the same meta as the last time, but is it? No, you might be surprised. Take care, everybody. Like, subscribe, do all that shit. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.